Maryland holds a unique place in the history of Special Olympics. In 1962, our founder, Eunice Kennedy Shriver, hosted camps for individuals with intellectual disabilities in her backyard in Rockville. These camps served as a catalyst for the first ever Special Olympics Games held in 1968 at Soldier Field in Chicago. Here in Maryland, we were founded in 1970 with our first ever Special Olympics Maryland Summer Games held at Towson State College in June. It was a time when many individuals with intellectual disabilities lived in state institutions and students attended school at special education centers exclusively for them. The genius of Mrs. Shriver's vision was so simple and remains so today. Sport as a catalyst for transforming lives. Today, the institutions no longer exist, and we have inclusive school environments. I am sure that in 1970, no one would have predicted that today in Maryland, 21 school systems have interscholastic unified sports programs, which combine Special Olympics athletes with their non-Special Olympics student athlete peers on teams that compete against one another. Over the last 12 years, the program has grown to include 127 high schools and over 3,000 student athletes. We also have a thriving unified young athletes program for individuals 7 and under, which has grown primarily through collaborative early childhood education that now includes 1,570 young athletes. And we have an athlete leadership program that is helping develop leadership skills that advance the mission. On Tuesday, 5 athletes, Rusty Buchanan, Abby Givens, Hannah Oxley, Derek Hamburg, and Sam Livingston, delivered inspiring messages on vision during the 4th annual Brave in the Attempt Talks presented by First Lady of Maryland, Mrs. Yumi Hogan. I am sure that no one would have predicted that 50 years ago. I'm so proud of how Special Olympics Maryland combines the power of sport with the compelling voice of our athletes to provide interactive, inclusive experiences for our athletes, unified teammates, coaches, volunteers, family members, supporters, and the community at large. We engage over 6,500 volunteers annually. We benefit from generous philanthropic donors and active partners like Aerotech, Care First, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Carnival, Coca-Cola, Constellation, SC&H Group, and Wawa, who not only fund our year-round program, but also provide volunteers. WBAL-TV, 98 Rock, and 1090 AM provide a media platform that helps tell the story of our athletes. One of the greatest examples of focusing on our athletes' abilities is the law enforcement torch run. Since 1986, law enforcement volunteers have been champions for our athletes in many ways, including presenting awards at our state competitions. The LETR partnership has helped raise over $45 million for our athletes. Law enforcement volunteers bring joy to our athletes while experiencing joyful inclusion. I'm grateful for higher education partners like Towson University and President Dr. Kim Schatzel. Thank you for your leadership and support and the commitment of the entire university. Carol Beatty, Secretary of the Department of Disabilities, thank you for being a champion for our athletes. I understand that we find ourselves in the midst of unprecedented times. I acknowledge record unemployment resulting in severe economic downturn combined with widespread social isolation due to COVID-19. It's not conducive to being optimistic about our future. But think about this. Most of you watching this know that only 45% of employable adults with intellectual disabilities are actually employed. So that's a 55% unemployment rate among our athletes. Let me be clear, we are not a jobs provider, but we do know sport makes our athletes better employees. You also know that throughout history, individuals with intellectual disabilities have been sidelined. They've been isolated, denied opportunities, and too often told, you can't, all because of a label. Athletes and families, you have shown incredible resilience from the beginning of time that has enabled you to overcome obstacles and achieve personal success. Who better to face this challenge than you? So I am inspired and optimistic because of you. Now I want to share with you some important health-related data that needs to influence our roadmap for the next 50 years. Did you know individuals with intellectual disabilities are 2 times more likely to be obese, 2 times as likely to have cardiovascular disease or asthma, 5 times as likely to have diabetes, and have a life expectancy that is reduced by an average of 16 years. when compared to their peers without intellectual disabilities. Overcoming significant challenges, that's in your DNA. Julian English was born 15 weeks early at 1 pound 15 ounces in 2004. Today, Julian is 16 years old. He's an athlete who runs 100 meters in 12.4 seconds and happens to have an intellectual disability. I know people who, if they had a conversation with Julian, would say, "What's wrong with him?" To which I would respond, "Nothing's wrong with him." We need to help people think differently about who our athletes are. There are also athletes like Thomas Smith and Monique Matthews who take pride in being essential workers. They are resilient role models. There are 8,716 athletes in Special Olympics Maryland, and each athlete has a story to tell. Every athlete is a gift to the world. So after 50 years, what's next? Our 5-year vision is to have 20,000 athletes by 2025. We believe that more of the 115,000 individuals in the state with an intellectual disability should have the ability to train and compete and grow through sports. Our focus is on smart growth through schools to create lifelong commitment to sport and health. Think about that. Through organized, scholastic, unified sport programs, we are inspiring and growing a generation that will live the most physically active and socially interactive, inclusive lives in history. That's the future that leads to a life of triumph and joy through sport, while opening doors to more employment, lifelong unified friendships, and a healthy lifestyle. As I bring this to a close, I would ask everyone watching to stand up. Athletes and family members, I applaud you and I thank you. You are the heroes of this celebration. Leadership volunteers, school administrators, coaches, officials, event volunteers, direct service providers, other volunteer supporters, and you fans in the stands, thank you all for believing in our athletes. By your presence here virtually, you are experiencing inclusion as part of our Special Olympics Maryland family. 50 years of evidence tells us that the real impact on our athletes and by our athletes extends beyond the field of play. So 50 years from now, I hope that people are talking about how Special Olympics programs and unified experiences resulted in significantly improved health, contributed to higher rates of employment, and created meaningful lifetime friendships. I look forward to continuing the journey where through sport and with leadership by our athletes, more people experience inclusion as a means of creating a world where opportunity is not limited by disability and where we start every relationship with respect and dignity focused on ability.